Here on the Safe Haven podcast, any names mentioned should not be considered as suspects unless officially stated as such by law enforcement. Any opinions during interviews on this podcast are the opinions of the interviewee and don't reflect the opinions of the Safe Haven podcast or the AMU cold case team. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Welcome to this episode of Safe Haven. I am your host, Justin. I am joined with Melissa, and we do have a special guest on with us tonight. Melissa, how are you doing?
I'm well. You and I have been together like all day. It's a good day for you, isn't it?
Yeah, we had a Zoom call with the prosecutor's office investigator earlier, which was really productive and really good. Looking forward to going back to Parkersburg here in the next couple weeks. Unfortunately, I will not be able to make the event. I have a prior obligation, but I will be there Sunday, Monday, and part of Tuesday. But yeah, so speaking of which, do you want to update us on that, Melissa?
Yeah, of course. So for all of our listeners who are part of our Facebook group and who listen to the podcast, we will be back in Parkersburg in about 2 weeks. So we'll be there I'll be there February 2nd through the 7th. The rest of the team is coming in. And on February 4th, we are having an event at North End Tavern. So we're having a meet and greet with the Safe Haven team, members of the Petty family, and we're also doing raffle items. Super exciting. I've posted some items that we have, and we are excited to meet all of the Safe Haven crew and get to, meet more people out there and raise more money. So everything of the raffle that we get, we will be donating back into the reward fund for Judy Petty to help us lead to an arrest.
Yeah, hopefully. I apologize to the listeners. I won't be able to be there, but like I said, I have a prior obligation. So if you end up wanting to meet up again on Sunday or Monday or something like that, I'm sure we can arrange that as well.
Yeah.
I'm pretty low-key in the group and don't say much, so I highly doubt anybody wants to talk to me.
I don't think so. So we're super excited about today's episode. I know I posted it in the Facebook group, but we do have a special guest on. We have Blake. I'm looking at him, so I'm like showing everyone, this is Blake, but you can't see him. Blake comes to us. He's a friend of Alan, so everyone knows Alan, who is our awesome fire expert. He recommended Blake to come on and talk to us. So we recently received the K9 reports on Judy's case. And one of the questions that we've had is about these dogs and what the K9 reports actually mean or say. And I'm not very knowledgeable on K9 search and rescue and how it works. So I want to welcome Blake to our show. Hey, Blake.
Hello.
Hi. Do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name is Blake. I come out of Arkansas. I have a bachelor's degree in criminology. I became a police officer here in Arkansas in 2003. My father and I started a search and rescue dog group in 2005. We began training and deploying with bloodhounds for man trailing. Through that, we realized that we needed other types of dogs in the search and recovery world. So in 2008, I trained my cadaver dog, Roxy. She's no longer with us, but a successful dog. Learned a lot from her. Through my work as a police officer in Drug Task Force Street Crimes, I decided to venture into the police dog training world since I was already doing detection work. 2011, I attended a professional school for police dog trainers and began BlueStreak K9. So from there, I started training police dogs. I sell police dogs all over the U.S. I've trained hundreds and hundreds of handlers, been invited to teach at seminars throughout the U.S. So, that's kind of my experience. I was also a K9 handler for my police department, lots of deployments and seized drugs and found bad guys and, just learned a lot. I have a lot of experience with different facets of the K9 training world, whether it be pet obedience or police dogs, drugs, bombs, search and recovery, tracking, felling, cadaver dogs, all sorts of experience and training.
Yeah, wow. I'm not familiar with all of these different things. And you're kind of already given me a lesson when we were talking on the phone about like what kind of dogs and certificates and is it this kind of dog and this kind of dog? I'm like, I have no idea. So I really would like to, kind of break down some basic questions for our listeners and then we can get more specific into Judy's case. So can you tell us a little bit about how long does it take to train a dog to become certified in like search and rescue? on average?
So a lot of that kind of depends on the dog, really.
Okay.
I mean, because like for dogs that I train for police work, I'm buying, the top of the line dogs with the best drives. And it's amazing how quick I can teach those dogs to find drugs and reliably. I mean, it's very quick. But for a search and recovery dog, depending on what discipline, it takes a while. I would think, just for example, for a cadaver dog, I would hope by deploying less than 3 months of initial training on a dog. And that is a dog with top level drives that understands training game and the deployment game as far as hunt and everything goes. But you've got to teach these dogs the odor. You've got to teach them how to hunt for it, what to do when they locate it, so you can read the dog and everything. So, on the easy end of it, I'm saying 12 weeks. That's just for cadaver dog. Trained dogs is a lot more. It's a lot more goes into. That's the hardest facet of training that I have found, and I train dogs to find about everything and bite people and everything else. And tracking and training takes the longest.
What does it mean when you say good traits? Is that what you said? What does that mean?
People think of a German Shepherd, they automatically think of a police dog. I mean, that's not the case. We as Americans have bred out all those qualities because we want to have the look of a police dog. It's scary and fierce and all this stuff. But most people can deal with the kind of what we call drive. Some people think tiredness. It's actually that drive for work, always wanting to hunt, always using their nose, that drive to go chase the ball, extreme amounts of food drive, whatever it is. These dogs don't typically make good pets. We try to breed them out. Like Malinois are a very popular dog now. I recommend them as pets for the general public, not unless you're involved in something like search and rescue or sport, like protection sports, or you're just a super active person. So those are the dogs that train quickly. And what I have found in the search and rescue world, it's a volunteer thing. I never got paid a dime for what I did in the search and recovery world. It was a volunteer service that my father and I did to help people. That was our goal. Our intent was to just help families need. So there is no money in that. And so a lot of times you get somebody paying out of their own pocket and they don't understand. I see a lot of dogs that are not up to the standard that they should even be trained for it. People with good intentions that don't necessarily have the money to start it, they end up with dog from the pound, or, well, I got a lab, or I got a German Shepherd. Well, that's exactly what you got, but doesn't necessarily train for this. The bloodhounds are the hardest dogs to find now. Bloodhounds, they've been bred to be pets like on Heat Hall, and that's just not the type of dog we're looking for. So the dog quality is the most important factor in the training, is having a quality dog.
What does it mean to get a dog certified in search and rescue?
They would have to, so the certification itself is basically to show reliability, that the dog reliably finds, for example, cadaver. There's going to be different situations, such as there's land cadaver. You have different certifications called wilderness. You have water certifications. You have different levels. Basically, the dog is tested in different environments. Land cadaver dog, they're going to be tested in a house. They're going to be tested probably around cars, in the woods, in the field. They're going to be tested in a couple different areas to see if they can locate what they've been trained to do, and also to bypass track odors and different things like that. And it's a team certification. So we're also testing the handler to see if they can recognize what their dog is doing, if their dog is in odor and has located in different things. Certifications aren't meant to be hard. They're not subjective. They shouldn't be subjective. They're meant to be objective. So sometimes, just because a dog has passed certification, I'm a certifier, a national and state recognized certifier for police dogs. I have passed police dogs that I personally wouldn't sell, and that I like, this dog's not very good, but they meet an objective standard. They met it in the time frame, and they found the odors, and the handler called it. So it's objective. And I'm still saying, like, man, that dog sucks. But just because it's certified doesn't mean it's a great dog. It just means it met a minimum standard.
Okay. Yeah. That's really helpful. Thank you for explaining that. Because one of the things in Judy's case, we'll talk about it, is these dogs were certified. And I will share that with you because you were asking about that, that's really important to know who they were certified for. Can you tell us what the difference is between a search and rescue dog and a cadaver dog in regards to certification? How?
I don't typically use the word, the search and rescue for me is a broad term that covers pretty well all the dogs that do some type of search for recovery or rescue. So for me, search and rescue covers trailing dogs, tracking dogs, cadaver dogs, air scent dogs, different things like that. When I kept asking questions about the different disciplines, so basically, okay, they're
Yes.
certified, so they have search and rescue certification. What is the certification for? And so you answered earlier, like it was for cadaver and trailing. So that's what the certifications are for, is they've been
Okay.
tested in. So it's just a different disciplines, like such as a police dog. People can understand that. You have drug dogs and bomb dogs. Oh, you got your dog's a police canine. Yes. Okay. What is he trained to do? He either finds bomb or he finds drugs. So that was
Okay.
kind of what we're getting through when that term search and rescue would be like using, oh, he's a police dog. Well, what all does he do?
If you're a search and rescue dog, how do you qualify someone for search and rescue? They have to locate people, or how?
So they're going to typically show training records, as far as like, hey, the dog is trained. You just got to meet the minimum standards that are set forth in those organizations. And like if they're non-police, they have to show a background check. The dog has to pass a AKC K9 good citizen test, which basically means the dog's social, not trying to bite everybody when it's around those scenes, stuff like that. There's some general requirements there, and then once they have all that stuff in order, then they can take their test.
So you're saying, though, I think we talked about this, you usually aren't, the dog isn't both search and rescue and cadaver?
No, they can be. Like
They can be.
my cadaver dog, Roxy, could track. I didn't ever use her for that because I had a team of bloodhounds. But I trained her just like, the police dogs, they find drugs, they track, do apprehension work, all that. So they can be trained in multiple facets. My thing is, like, if you have a true, real good cadaver dog, I mean, it can definitely be trained to track, but the more you divide a dog, I feel like it hurts the other stuff. They can absolutely do it and do it well, but, it's a jack of all trades, master of none type situation.
So it's one of those things where you could have a dog do all of these different, certificates,
Absolutely.
But the more you train a dog and you split it, there's more chance for maybe confusion or not getting to be an expert in that certain field.
Possibly, like I said, maybe it comes back to quality dog. Like my new cadaver dog he is an amazing dog. He could absolutely be a stellar tracking dog, but I'm not going to use him for that. He's going to be trained in a single discipline just because of the what we're doing. But in the police world,
Right.
we train them in 5-6 different areas, and they do well at all of it. So I'm not saying it can't be done and they can't be good at it all. They definitely can be.
When we look at the case file for Judy, if we kind of look at her case, we have a report, but it's very vague. It's not very helpful, does not tell us a lot. And unfortunately, the handler who wrote these reports is not wanting to come and talk to us. So all we have is her reports, which do not tell a whole lot. And this is her report that I shared with you. She was there on February 8th. So 2 days after, 3 if you count the 6th, that Judy disappeared. And we have her with 2 dogs. So there was 2 different people up there. There was Wanda and Shirley, who were the dog handlers. One of the questions that I have for you based on this report is, one of the dogs, Cricket, we don't know what kind of dogs, or I think I found out there were labs.
Right. I would assume that they're definitely not bloodhounds if they're doing cadaver. If they were just trailing,
Okay.
I might say it's the bloodhound, but if they're doing cadaver, it wasn't the bloodhound.
They circled on here the ground and cadaver type of search. She said in here that Cricket, which is one of the dogs, was able to track Judy's scent from the barn down the driveway to Route 31. So for our listeners, as you know, we know that Judy was at her property. And the question was, when Chris Cutright said he dropped her off, is that really what happened? Did she walk up that driveway? Did she not? We now have the K9 report that says that Cricket was able to track Judy's scent from the barn down to the driveway all the way to Route 31. So my question to you, Blake, is how long does a typical scent of a person stay in the air in the ground? If it's 3 days later, is the dog able to pick that up?
If the conditions are right, odor can stick around for a few days, but the conditions are going to be perfect. I have been behind bloodhounds a lot, but if you really look back at it and train, you try to do a couple of track handler involvement, like manipulation, as far as like you know that where they went, or that's our property up at the barn, something like it. You got to take that into consideration too. And I have to speak a lot from the police aspect. Our success rate in police tracking people is extremely low. It's not because our dogs are no good. My agency's dogs are phenomenal tracking dogs, and we find very few people because they get gone or somebody picks them up, something like that. Especially with the cell phone age, it's hard to find them. But our success rates are higher chances to find somebody. But usually, you start getting out there after 20, 30 minutes, your chances to find somebody are 20% or below probably, because the odor and traffic, what we got to consideration on this particular deal. Okay, they're there 3 days later. The fire trucks have been there. People have been looking for all these different odors. The odor has been disturbed. They've been up and down this driveway. I believe that in the report it sets up about a storm. Not that the rain will wash away the scent, but it will disperse it. So you've got all these different factors that dispersing the scent everywhere. Majority of your well-recognized trainers these days in the police world are going to be like, no, the Deo tracks are a joke. They're not able to locate. But the scent can still be there in certain areas. Like, let's say there's an area with moisture undisturbed that they walk past. The moisture can hold that scent for 3 or 4 days probably. But if she walked up that driveway, I mean, what about all the firemen? How many firemen went up there? How many fire brush trucks and back and forth trips? I mean, dogs can scent discriminate, absolutely, but it gets really hard in those situations.
Okay, so they had a scent item of Judy's, which is what they use for this dog. And this, again, is 3 days later. How reliable would you say this is in your experience?
Let me say this. I think it's irresponsible to tell the family that she hit and she was here and we don't know when is exactly what the report said. Was it 3 days ago? Was it 5 days ago? I mean, what do you mean by that? That I guess the only evidence that we have is her body was there. I don't know how you can sit there and say that she was here. And I know they're going to, what the response to that from the handler is, well, I know my dog. You should know your dog through training. What a handler means by they got a hit. What I'm thinking is, okay, you gave your dog scent article, you cast your trailing dog out on the line, and then the dog gives what we call alert behavior. So in other words, dog, through what you think and what you see in training, dog has a change of breathing. That's what we're looking for first, a direction change. That's what all the alert entails. And then, I number the tracks when I'm tracking. Like number 1 is that alert to the track. Okay, there's different. Their dog is honing in on a certain area. And then number 2, the dog's driving into the track. It's trying to pull you down the trail, okay? And to me, that is what we would consider a hit on a track. But was he on the right track? Sometimes in police work, we don't find the guy, but we find the mask they wore, the gloves they wore in the robbery, and we track and we're like, yeah, we were on because we found evidence. Here's the glove. We got him on video wearing these gloves. We got DNA out of the gloves. And many times I get called, this police handler's talking, I think I was on, but I don't know, but he definitely was tracking. I think we were on. We tracked this area to a road and he lost it. So that's our thoughts as handlers. We want our dogs to be right. So they get on something, you track for ways, maybe get any evidence. They're saying, like, I think I was on, but you don't know. You got to kind of be objective about it. You don't know. If you found evidence or tracked to that seller, like, okay, yeah, no, we tracked her straight from the road, straight to the seller. Okay, that's a little interesting.
And that's not what happened. It doesn't look like from the report. The dog started at the barn, which isn't next to the house or the cellar. It's over there. So possible, she did go up the driveway and went to the barn, but why is there nothing over by the cellar? Because she obviously was over there.
The odor travels. Okay, so we're talking, like I said, there was some wind and stuff like that.
There was wind, and then there was the light dusting the snow too that night, but the wind was very high.
The light dusting the snow could have helped preserve the trail. Actually, when you walk, you got to think if you were walking with a smoke bomb tied to your head and walking around and there's a breeze, think about where the odor is going. So it's hard to say. The report leaves me with a ton of questions. It's so vague.
And I talked to a lady there today from Wood County who is part of the volunteer organization, the Wood County Search and Rescue. I said, hey, the handler isn't talking to us. Do you have anything on these dogs, the certification? Is there anything that you know about these dogs? Her report back was from people who worked with the handler at that time. They said that she had a phenomenal dog, that she was like the best of the best, which is good to hear. But, there is a question still about why was the dog not picking up other scents and only going down the trail, and then it seemed to stop. So I'm not quite sure about how that plays into anything.
So what we probably should call it is a non-productive alert. Basically, what she's saying, we use the term alert police a lot. It's a non-productive response. So it's hard to say. There's nothing evidence-wise saying except her word. I have been many places where search and rescue handlers, even police handlers, because they want to be right, they don't want to be wrong, and then they'll say things like, well, "It was here," or, "I think, what do you know?" When we're dealing with this kind of stuff, I think it went this way. We'll go check that lead out. If it produces something, great. If not, well, hey, we tried. My question was, they had a cadaver dog. Why did a cadaver dog not alert to a burned dead body if it was that close to it? I mean, dogs do miss. Their nose has to pass the odor. But I would think being around that building, the dog would have had the odor in basically a small box.
And that was one of my questions too. But you just said something I had a question on. What does it mean when you were talking about the dog was not giving off any alert? Or what do you mean by that? I mean, sometimes there's no indication that the dog was alerting.
I'm saying it's a non-productive. I didn't come up with nothing. She says it was on trail. There's nothing there. It's really a tough one. I don't want to Monday morning quarterback the handler and the dog. I don't know. It's judging off the report, things like that. The dogs were not any help in this particular case. Just judging off of that. It's not. There's nothing really to go off of there. But
and her notes aren't that great. I mean, that's the point. Like, hey, if you did better notes, right, of saying how you. I mean, you told the family you got a sent from Judy item and said, oh, you told the family she tracked it down, but then that's all we know. And so I think you're absolutely right to talk about that because there's no other signs that show that the dog was picking up on her scent. And you make a good point about the wind too, because that's what I think carried over to the house from the cellar based on our conversation with Alan.
Like I said, it's I'll try to throw him a bone here. Sometimes dogs alert vehicles and we don't find any drugs. We do street side interviews, and they're like, we just smoked some weed, or my cousin borrowed my car this morning, and he deals drugs. So they basically tell us, yes, there was drugs in my car. And dogs alert to the odor. If that dead body was in there, you took it out, a day later you come back with the dog, that odor is probably still going to be there. The dog can indicate because they alert to the actual odor, not the actual body laying there. It's the odor of that body. Those are sometimes non-productive alerts, and sometimes these dogs indicate, and people lie to it. We don't find the evidence the drugs were there, and the person's we know they're probably lying just because we've done this a long time. Like, I know they're lying. I know they use drugs, but at the end of the day, when you log that, it's a non-productive alert. It ends up being an unknown. It's kind of what we're dealing with here. It's just unknown. I don't want to say no, they weren't there. They're wrong. I don't know if they were wrong or right. The mistake that search and rescue handlers make is speaking to the family. Ask questions prior, and you may have a few post questions to follow up that maybe make sense of what your dog did. I never went to the family. I think he's here. I think he's there. I might tell the sheriff or the law enforcement, but it's not my place to go talk to the family.
Right. And that's, unfortunate. That gears it towards something else, right? And so one of the things I want to talk about is one of the dogs showed interest in an area in front of the fireplace. Again, the whole house was burnt down, but there's the fireplace. And then the other dog supposedly worked the area hard, but didn't want to stay. We kind of talked about this a little bit, but what does it mean to show interest versus hitting? Is each dog separate based on their sign for showing interest in hitting? What does that even mean?
Yeah, every dog's, they all resemble, like me being a dog trainer. It may look a little different each dog, but they primarily all look the same. Showing interest, I've heard that term many times. I have even used that term while out on a cadaver deployment. Looking back, you learn, like I said, you learn a lot from past deployments, and you mature in that particular field or whatever field you're in. You learn. I should maybe say that because if I'm on the river looking for somebody that's drowned, there's been times where my dog showed a ton of interest for the side of the boat, but she never gave me the indication. It was nothing that I would call, because you got to think, I'm not going to put a diver's life in jeopardy. I say, I got some interest right here. Now, there has been times where I've been out on the river and my dog was go hard in one spot, and the divers were going to dive no matter what. I said, listen, if you're going to dive, maybe start here first. You know what I mean? And just possibly, I got a lot of here compared to everything else. If you're going to dive, try here first, maybe more productive. That's kind of probably what they mean by interest. Their dog was showing different behavior in that area.
Okay.
Dogs show different behavior in a lot of circumstances. must have resembled what she has seen in training while working. She must have thought, boy, it's really directed. It's basically interest would mean the dog was directing its sniff in a particular area.
I wish we had more clarity on this, because in regards to her reports, because, one of the things that I have a question is the dogs kind of were showing, if you will, interest in the cellar, but it was too hot for them to go down in, but they wanted to. But even if these remains are like cremated, there wasn't hardly anything left. One of the things that we thought was that dogs can't pick up after a certain point of remains if it's cremated. Is that true?
No, there's still bones and stuff there. DNA may be gone type situations, but there's still bone fragments and different things left at that point. There's still human odor. You got to understand, we as humans have about 10 million olfactory receptors in our noses. Dogs have anywhere from 200 to 300 million olfactory receptors. So that is why we use dogs. We don't, I don't even sometimes think that we know just how good animals' noses are, but I've seen my dog do some amazing stuff as far as finding things. I can literally go hide a tooth, one human tooth in my yard, and he will find it. Gets the wind blows across, he's downwind, you'll see him give the alert behavior, and then he'll go find it. Train final response, which is typically either a down or sit and stare.
Wow. So even though her body was cremated to her remains where there's hardly anything left, besides her liver, they should have still been able to pick up and hit on that if they were cadaver dogs.
Should, I emphasize the word should, because let's say maybe there's a lot of heat. You got to think how sensitive the dog's noses are. But the way that we train, we work on thresholds. So I train to source as much as possible. So in other words, I want my dog to get as close as possible to finding what he is looking for. If I'm training drugs or bombs or whatever, if the dog can get 2 inches from it, then get 2 inches from it. But if you can only get as close as 10, 15 foot from it, you still have to indicate. So that's kind of where it's at.
Yeah, and so they were showing interest, in the cellar, wanting to go down in there, but I don't think they actually gave an alert sign. That's how I'm reading it. Would you agree? Or is
I agree. She pulled the dog because she put a sad face out there that they pulled the dogs away. And I understand why they did that, because then they're thinking, what have I got to find? Because let's be real, as bad as what it is for family stuff, you've worked hard to train a dog to do a certain job. If it's there, you want to find it. No matter if it's a dead body, a missing kid, tracking a criminal, it's like you want that find. That's what it's like. Yes, it's paid off. I understand the little sad face of the report because they pulled their dog off a find.
Okay, so it was everything leading to her remains there. The dog was showing interest in that.
Possibly that could have been, without her talking and saying, who knows what they would say now, but. I understand the reports writing interest so they could go back and like, well, this area my dog gave behavior changes, but I can pretty well remember most of my deployments in cadaver, and how my dog acted in certain places and didn't act and different things like that. So
one of the other questions I have is, and you mentioned this too, what does work area hard mean? Is it just like the dogs are focused on that area? Because in the report, it says that Cricket worked the woods behind the house and cellar and wanted to go in the cellar. But does this mean that Cricket picked up Judy's scent in the woods behind the house? Because that's one of the things we're considering is, did she come in through the back way? What does work area hard mean?
And I have to assume what it means to me because like I said, that's what I said, work very hard. So the dog is very directed in its sniffing in one particular area. So let's say behind the cellar, the dog just keeps working it and doesn't want to leave the area or something like that. Let's say that maybe the wind was blowing towards the woods. How far would it? If the woods was relatively close, that'd be fine that it worked from the woods to the cellar because we call it a scent cone. You're the point of origin of the scent, and then if the wind's blowing it away, that just gets wider and wider and wider. And the scent cone can be huge, and the dog's like. I actually worked on a case with a cadaver dog last year. It wasn't my dog. It was somebody I was just as their flanker. We did not want to go in this person's backyard. We were in the city, basically walking through properties, missing person. We thought probably suicidal. We got about 150 yards from where the body was found in a treehouse about 12 foot up. That dog, when we worked, We worked for probably 4 hours total, all over the place. And that particular area, the dog was giving that interest sniffing that they're probably referring to. Like, I'm like, this looks like, the dog's like, okay, where's this at? And we didn't let the dog go any further. There's a big, nice house, and this lady is not associated with. Well, a few hours later, one of our officers just thought, let me go check that. And sure enough, she was in there and killed herself, and it was a very gory scene with all the blood and everything. The dog probably did smell that from 150 yards away, but you kind of see what I'm saying. Like, the dog was showing interest. Like, I'll never know. Like I said, that handler pulled out, and we just won't know if that was really the case or if we should have let the dog go. Telling you that story kind of lets you know what the thought process probably is in their minds.
Right. And that's exactly it, because it leads us to so many different questions. Like, you're hoping to narrow it down, and we really can't right now with the reports that we have, because one of the questions, like I mentioned, is, now we have a dog walking, saying that she walked up the driveway, but then we have a dog working hard in the back area. But is it all just kind of the same set from her being there in the wind and the fire, that it is kind of in these different places, and it doesn't mean that she came in from the back at all?
My professional opinion, the trailing dog stuff is moot point. There's been too much traffic up there. You had storms, snow, whatever else, wind, and just all the traffic, and she's there 3 days later. The trailing, and there's no evidence to say yes, except she thinks through training. The trailing dog is a moot point, in my opinion. My interest would be in the cadaver dog, because that's the one at that point, because it's no longer trailing phase. It would be cadaver dog stuff, and They didn't find any evidence in anywhere that they trailed. So at that point, you can't put any stock into the trailing.
Okay, fair enough.
Maybe the dog being interested behind the cellar in the woods going towards the cellar, I'll put a little stock in that, because very well could the wind may have been blowing that direction and the odor was blowing right through there, and the dog was in cadaver mode.
I guess I'm just interested in what dog was which. Like, if Cricket's the one who worked the trail and did that, is Cricket the cadaver dog, or is it?
You said that one of them was certified in both trailing and cadaver.
Dual purpose, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know which one, or if they both were.
It's hard to say. I kind of like it was Cricket, because that's the dog's name that was mentioned so many times. So it may have been that. And that's another thing too. You gotta look at the breed of dog. I think you said that they were labs. Labs make great tracking and trailing dogs, but the bloodhound is second to none when it comes to trailing dogs. It's my personal opinion, because I've trained behind them. I've trained tons of different breeds for tracking and trailing. The bloodhound is the best at it. Don't get me wrong, shepherds and pointers and all them, they're phenomenal tracking dogs, but I don't know how what the lab was like. I don't.
Well, even looking at it now, Blake, I'm like reading it again, and it says that Cricket was the one who worked the area hard, but didn't want to stay in front of the fire. But then Cricket worked the woods behind the house and the cellar, and wanted to go into the cellar. And Cricket was the one who did the trail.
Okay. I thought Cricket was the dog for the deployment, both.
Okay. I'm just curious. All right. So, like you said, in your opinion, I mean, what are some of your suggestions, or is there anything else we can do or get from these reports about?
No, I do highly believe that the dogs in this situation, and I'm a dog guy, but the dog is not always the answer, and the dogs don't always provide. Just based off the reports, I don't know much about like the actual case and everything. Based off the actual K9 report, there is not any useful information into solving the crime with these particular dogs. I think you can put a lot of stock into what they said about the trailing. Well, she was here. We don't know it. You don't even know what direction. I don't know.
Yeah, no, fair enough. This is what we want to hear, is just you're an expert in this. You've been doing this, you train, and it's just, looking at everyone's opinion and weighing in on this. And that's what this investigation is. It's more of a crowdsourced investigation. So
it's not, it's not what you prove, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
Right.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. That's what separates us in the police world versus somebody that's not in our world. I worked in drug tests for a lot of years in investigations. I knew a lot of people that were selling dope, but what I could prove in a court of law. What can I prove to get this person locked up? It's not what you know. What you know can lead you in the right direction, but unfortunately, based off the case notes here, there's nothing to lead us anywhere. no evidence, like didn't track to a shoe. Like there was a footprint. They said that was non-productive. That would have been the only thing. Like, oh, they found a footprint. Nah, the dog didn't give us nothing on it. So basically just non-productive is what the K9 deployment was.
And I'm glad you mentioned about the footprint, and I didn't think about that. She didn't report that the dog picked up the footprint up by the shed.
No, basically that number, that footprint wasn't associated with anything her dog said. So you got to go with it, especially long ago.
Justin, I know I asked all the questions because I'm like so involved. I'm like, what? I don't understand any of this. Do you have any questions for Blake?
Blake was answering a lot of my concerns as he was answering your questions. Mine just mainly centered around the reliability, the accuracy percentage, and Blake answered all of those. Definitely satisfied my questions. So
this was really helpful, Blake, because I think for us on the team, we constantly go round and round and round about the driveway, and then seeing this report, you're like, oh, what does this mean? And I think you're absolutely right. I think we have to toss it aside. It doesn't really tell us
I think
anything.
You're going down a dead end with that particular situation. I hate it because we have been very helpful in the past, with dog handlers, even in the search and recovery world. But this particular one, you ain't always going to be able to help. And I think that's the situation here with that. And, and I can tell you from a law enforcement perspective with my involvement, I've been on my cadaver dog is actually on the NBC's Today Show at one point on a case that were on the FBI there, and NBC Today Show was there, and here's Roxy, I'm sitting there, she's on national TV, but, the search and recovery world sort of has, I hate to say a bad name, but there's a lot of them that come out of the woodworks that say they have these dogs and they show up with these fat house pets that have no drive. And you got to understand, most police, even if they're not canine handlers, they see our dogs and how they are, their drives and everything. You see this one little dog, he's walking around, sniff, 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 and you're like, whatever. And when I showed up on these big scenes, like there was a big flood here, there was 11 people that died in it, and I show up, it's across the state, based off the way my dog worked compared to everybody else, the game fish was like, you're coming with us to the hot area where we haven't been, and we feel like there's probably going to be bodies. I know you get mad, but I'm like, I'm one of them, I'm a police officer, and they did it when I show up. And a lot of times I would be in front of some of them that get in what we call the hot areas, like this is probably a productive area. Some of these people just don't have the necessary training that they need and stuff. And there's so many good organizations out there. I've worked with some phenomenal search and rescue people, and that's all they do. They volunteer, but they do it right. They have the right dogs, the right training, the right support system, and that's very important. And this group, they sounds like they probably, especially since they were certified and different things, they were probably putting in the time and the training. It's just, unfortunately, in this case, it was no help.
And the reports were no help, and that's the thing. If it was all in her head and she didn't write it down or document it, she could have gave us more, right?
That's exactly. What it is in the police. If you don't write it down or it ain't on camera anymore, it didn't happen. So.
Right. No, same in healthcare. I'm in healthcare. Right. If you didn't do it, didn't chart it, it didn't happen, right? So anyways, awesome. Well, you've been amazing. And if it's okay, if we have another question, we can reach back out to you.
Sure.
If you're in our Facebook group, if anyone has any questions after the episode, please let me know. I can always reach out to Blake and ask them and get back to you. But this is really, again, thank you so much. Another expert on the Judy Huddy case. And, we'll just keep going forward and see what we can do. So thank you so much.
We appreciate it, Blake. Thanks a lot for taking the time.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. Again, another episode of Safe Haven.
All right, good deal.